can all get to our seats, then we can be able to begin the program. And this could be a presentation on Operation Gunnerside from the Second World War. It occurred in Wehrmacht, Rockaway, Norway, 27 and 28 February of 1943. It's been said that this operation, the heavy water sabotage, was the most important mission of World War II you've probably never even heard about. And from people that we're talking to, we're finding out people in schools are not even learning anything about this. The mission of Operation Gunnerside was to destroy what the Nazis had as the heavy water facility at Wehrmacht. Okay? British SOE, which was Special Operations Executive, called this the most successful act of sabotage in all of World War II. And they were not just referring to what happened on the Atlantic side, but also what happened throughout World War II on the Pacific side against Japan. Little piece about British SOE. The Service Special Operations Executive. It operated from 1940 to 1945. It was comparable to the American OSS. It was the Office of Strategic Services. And basically it was a spy organization. Infiltrate behind the lines, be able to pick up any secrets, find out what the enemy's doing, and how to combat against them. In England, it was known as the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Boy, is that a nice British way of saying what they were doing? Right? Nazis called it the School of Gangster Warfare because they were not playing by the rules of warfare. If we take a look at pop culture for a moment, okay? British SOE, author Ian Fleming based James Bond 007 on an SOE agent who was codenamed White Rabbit. Okay? What organization does Bond report to? Is it?
I believe it was Universal Exports was the front name, but Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Okay. MI6, right? Right? Well, British SOE did evolve to what MI6 is today. Little piece coming from Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming worked with British intelligence during the Second World War, and he did work with, though not directly part of, SOE. Now, the agent that was known as White Rabbit was actually a British agent that went by Seahorse and Shelley. And the Nazi Gestapo knew him as White Rabbit. So, FYI, pop culture of what Ian Fleming created and how he created Bond was from SOE. Okay? Although we have no proof and nothing that I've been able to find in all the books that I went through, that the leader of Gunnerside, Joachim Ronenberg, I found no evidence that he ever introduced himself as Ronenberg. Joachim Ronenberg. Okay? Timelines that are important to this. Norsk Hydro, when it was built in 1911, it was the largest hydroelectric plant in the entire world. In 1927, they built the hydrogen plant in front. It was a 7-story building. Okay? And they did the electrolysis of water, which is if you run current through water, you can separate oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen was pumped down into Rjukan to a nitrate plant to make fertilizer. One of the side products that they found by doing electrolysis of H2O was that it produced heavy water, which is deuterium oxide, D2O. And D2O, although it's not a radioactive substance, it is important as a moderator for splitting U-235 uranium and being able to make plutonium. So it slows the processing down of the atoms as they're colliding, and it allows the splitting of those atoms. In 1934, Norsk Hydro was producing about 40 kilograms of D2O for sale to the scientific community. They abandoned the sale in June of '39 as it was a losing operation. It just was not effective to be able to produce it. In December of '38, German physicist Otto Hahn with Lise Meitner and Franz Strassmann discovered atomic fission and splitting of U-235 by hurling neutrons at it. This became very interesting to German chemists and physicists. Circa April 1939, 4 months later, Germany halts all uranium ore exports from Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia. In July of '39, Albert Einstein sends a letter to FDR warning that Germany is indeed seeking to develop an atomic bomb. And in 1939, FDR then set up the preliminaries of what later became the Manhattan Project. 9 April 1940, Germany invades Norway. Why did they do it? One, they wanted, for the Kriegsmarine, the Nazi Navy, ports for their U-boats and naval access to the Atlantic. They also wanted to be able to bring the shipping iron ore from the mines in neutral Sweden going through the port of Narvik. And the Vemork heavy water plant was not an interest in the initial invasion, but quickly became number one, as their number one objective. That's the headline of the London Evening News on April 9th, 1940. Hitler invades Norway and Denmark. Narvik is up here, the port of Narvik. In atomic bomb research, Germany, it was called the Uranium Club, headed by Kurt Diebner and Werner Heisenberg, among others. In Great Britain, they called it tube alloys. That was in early 1940. The USA, it was the Manhattan Project, originally, as I said, from 1939, but didn't become fully active until August of '42. Post-World War II is important here because Werner Heisenberg, it was Operation Epsilon. At the end of World War II, they gathered 10 of the prominent physicists and chemists from Norway or from Germany and brought them to England. And they put them up at Farm Hall. What they didn't tell them is this place is heavily bugged. We had microphones in every room and listened in on every conversation that they had. One of the things they learned from that was that Heisenberg had said, if Germany were able to have 50% more heavy water and 50% uranium, they could have indeed made a fissionable reactor to make plutonium and construct a bomb. Would they have made something on the order of Fat Man and Little Boy, the two that we dropped on Japan? Right? That is much still up to debate, but there was enough to say they could have indeed made a dirty bomb. Dropped those over London and made London completely radioactive. Okay. This one we're not able to run because we had issues with PCs. But the important thing here was that Norway, in 2015, for the Norway television network, They made a 6-part miniseries called The Heavy Water War. It is the most viewed television show in Norway television history, having the largest audience. And it's a 6-part series on what was the entire Heavy Water War. It was the only one that Joachim Ronenborg, who headed Gunnerside, indicated that this was done accurately. In 1965, Hollywood made a movie called The Heroes of Telemark that he said could never have been more inaccurate. Right? It was Hollywood's version. Right? The Norsk Hydro plant, what's there today versus what was, the building in the back there is the old hydro generating station. 7-story building in the front is the hydrogen plant. That's where heavy water was being produced. And they came down from the top, taking water through electrolysis cells, almost 1,800 cells up on that top floor. And they fed down into another 600 or so cells into the second floor. Coming down to, at the time when, 1934 time frame, there were 3 cells in the bottom, in the basement, and it dripped like what would be a leaky faucet. And that was indeed deuterium oxide. When Germany invaded, at first they upped this thing 300%. And then they upped it again, another 400%. They wanted tons of this in a year. Germany needed 5 tons to be able to build a fissionable reactor. One of the biggest players, probably one of the most prominent players, was not a person, it was an area called the Hardangervidda, the largest mountain plateau on the entire European continent. Elevation anywhere from 3,000 up to 6,000 feet, much of it above timberline. Over 3,500 square kilometers, not miles, okay? But how big is 3,500 square kilometers? Larger than the state of Rhode Island. In the winter, it's one of the most inhospitable places in the world. Arctic conditions, temperatures can plunge to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Winds that will knock you over. Storms that can come up unannounced. And wind chills can kill within hours. Visibility near zero in a whiteout. When Germany invaded Norway, they went around it. They wanted nothing to do with trying to cross the Hardangervidda. If they needed to go into it, even mechanized, they would go into a half-day's distance so that they could be off it before the sun went down. There were 2 missions prior to this, Grouse and Freshman. Grouse did survive. That was 5 Norwegians parachuted onto the Hardangervidda as a preliminary job to pick a landing site to bring Freshman in. Freshman was basically the Royal Marines of England. They were being towed over by 2 gliders, and Halifax bombers were doing the towing. Both gliders crashed, 1 Halifax crashed. Under German Hitler's commando order, they were all executed, or those that didn't die in the crash, interrogated and then executed. 37 sappers, pilots, and crew. But post-Freshman, because Germany, when they realized what Operation Freshman is, and by finding what they were carrying in maps that had Rjukan and Vemork circled on the maps, they knew what their destination was. They made the decision, this is just the beginning of an invasion. So in early December 43, they increased the Nazi troops in Rjukan. They installed machine guns and searchlights mounted on the rooftops of the hydrogen and the hydro plant. German garrisons were increased at Lake Moss, which is the feeder lake up on the Hardangervidda that's feeding the water to the hydro plant. They went from 10 to 40 guards on that. In Weimar, they increased it from 10 to 30. In Rjukan, from 24 to 200. The SS and the Gestapo also came in at this time. A new pair of DF, direction finder stations, were now in place and operating 24/7. Anybody that was up on that plateau, if they were transmitting, the DF finders could locate them. But you needed two. Because if one DF were crossing and picking up the signal on this line, and the second DF was picking one up this way as transmission of a radio, the intersecting point of those two lines was exactly where the radio was. And they would send people in, interrogate them, and execute them. It was illegal to have a radio. The bridge that led over to Weimar, they doubled the bridge guard. And on the penstocks, the pipes feeding down from Lake Moss down into the hydro plant, they increased the mines and searchlights for that area. Introduce you to Joachim Ronenborg. This past year would have been his 100th birthday, but he passed away in 2018. He was the last member of Operation Gunnerside. He was born August 30th, 1919. Ålesund, Norway, where he was born and he passed away there. Spent his entire life there. Okay? And on 21 October of 18 is when he passed away. He was the last surviving member of Operation Gunnerside, and he was the leader of it. He was with Norwegian resistance in the Norwegian Army, 1940 to 1945. He had a career at NRK, which is Norway's broadcasting. Right? Right. Last year, when he passed away, on the Sons of Norway Facebook site, I had put a piece up there that I posted. And MRW from Huntington Station, New York, said in part, I recall my mom, who grew up in Rjukan, telling us kids, something big happened there. What, was that an understatement to it? Yeah, something big indeed. That's Joachim at age 22. 10 months after Germany invaded, now talking February 1941, he and 10 friends escaped Norway by boat to England. In England, he contacted a friend in England who was indeed recruiting for the SOE. He wanted to get back to Norway. Worked with British SOE. By the end of 42, he had been named leader of Operation Gunnerside. Pick 6 men to go with you, because you'll team up with Grouse, who was already on the ground. And there were 4 men in Grouse, so that made 10. That was the entire Gunnerside team. They were going to sabotage the plant with only 10 people. 16 February 1943, after 2 delays, the delays were in December and in January. They needed a moon to be able to pull this off and get onto the Hardangervidda. He led the Gunnerside team parachuting onto the Vida in the middle of a 5-day blizzard. They said, we are not postponing this anymore. They could have jumped in January, but they didn't because of weather conditions. This time they said, we're going in. Linked up with Swallow on the 22nd So they parachuted in on the 16th. 6 days later, they were able to link up with the teams named Swallow. On 27 February, after surviving on the Vita for now 9 days, 11 days, right, Ronenberg briefed the team on what it was that they were going to be doing. Right? But he was not going to be the sole one to make the decision, even though he was leading. He would present everything to the team, and the team themselves discussed it and determined how they would do it, how they'd do this job. Some of the options were, we can come down through the penstocks, but they're mined and guarded from above. We can go to the suspension bridge. It's going to be the most direct to come in. That's where the plant is, right there. These are the penstocks coming up. Or you can come down here, you can cross the suspension bridge and take the Z up like that to where your target is. Right up in here, that little bare spot that you see across there, that's where the hydrogen plant was, 7 stories tall. Or you could come in through the gorge, 275 feet below that suspension bridge, and then do a 600-foot vertical climb to the railroad line that ran from Weimar all the way down into Rjukan and out to Lake Tins. The team decided the gorge seemed to be the best choice. Be the hardest one to do, but that's the one that we're going to do. Helberg, one of the members of Gunnerside, was to survey the route at dawn on the 27th. Temperatures were rising, not falling at this point. And the winds that were kicking up were an indication there was a storm coming in. When Helberg had gotten back to the cabin that they were using, the orders were, this is the way we're going to go in, get some sleep. We are leaving at 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., 9 men on skis in white camouflage over British uniforms. They did not want, if they were caught, to have anyone recognize they were Norwegians or that this began from Rjukan. Because then there'd be retaliation against the locals. Gunnerside left their cabin on the edge of the Vita, armed with 5 Tommy guns, pistols, knives, grenades, chloroform pads, and explosives, and cyanide pills hidden in their uniforms. If they were to be captured, they were to take that cyanide pill. At 9 p.m., they crossed from Weimar. They're now 1,500 feet across the valley from the plant. And at that distance, they could still hear the hum of the turbines in that plant. At 10 p.m., they began their descent into the gorge, down to the Mono River. White suits off, skis left behind at a checkpoint that they would return to. Winds were warm and melting the snow and the ice. The hum from the power plant covering their sounds. And they crossed a melting ice bridge and then began a 600-foot vertical climb to the railroad. By 11:30 p.m., Gunnerside was on the railroad line. Okay. That drawing gives you where the penstocks came down. That's the hydrogen plant. They came in from this side through the gorge, underneath the suspension bridge, and then made this climb. When Helberg had reported back to them, he said, it wouldn't be easy if we did this in daylight. We're doing this at night. And based it strictly on the fact that there were trees that had grown into the rock, at least they'd have handholds. And as they had been trained at SOE, it was when you're climbing, and we hear this to this day, don't look down. Right? Right. as they came in, that's the suspension bridge, the way it is across the gorge. Okay? Top of the suspension bridge, 275 feet to the bottom. And they came in across this. Now they're out of their white camouflage suits. They're in British wool uniforms. And at times they are waist deep and shoulder deep in snow, trying to do this and make the climb. Carrying the equipment, carrying the explosives in their rucksacks.
Jeff,
Yes.
go back to that picture. Until you're standing there looking at it, you can't understand why they couldn't bomb it. The plant could not be bombed because of its location in the gorge.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the gorge, they couldn't drop coming across the gorge this way. They couldn't drop them. Couldn't come this direction, and they couldn't come up straight up the gorge.
Yeah.
It was impossible.
They had to come in over Lake Camp and then come up through Rjukan to Vemor. Right? The elevation in Vemor is close to 2,000 feet. Okay? Where the height that they would have been flying at, they are right in line with anti-aircraft fire. Right? Sabotage. Guards changed every 2 hours. So at midnight, they're up there at 11:30 on the rail line. Right? The plan was wait until 12:30, let the guards get settled first. Then the raid begins. First, the covering team goes in. Okay, that was Knut Hauklid and Jens Paulsen were the 2 leaders of that. There were 5 of them. They cut the chain on the gate, swung a 12-foot gate open, and then entered. The demo team of 4 followed. Team 1 was Ronenberg and Kaiser. They moved first to the first floor and the basement doors. When Germany said that they were going to reinforce that plant, they made sure that everything was locked. There's no access through any of the doors that they were supposed to come in from. SOE, Leif Tronstad, who was very familiar with the plant, identified that there is a narrow cable pipe tunnel between the floors. You may be able to gain access that way. The tunnel was wide enough for 1 man to go in at a time. Ronenberg entered it first, Kaiser behind him. They were able to make access to that, get in and look down, and they could see where the high concentration cells were. They dropped 15 feet down there into the basement. Barging into the high concentration room, they startled a Norwegian night shift worker named Gustav Johansen and ID'd themselves as British soldiers. They're in British uniforms, but they speak perfect Norwegian. Right? To do as we say and no harm will come to you. Ronenberg immediately starts setting sausage-shaped charges of Noble 808, which is a plastic explosive. Kaiser is guarding Johansen. It was now approaching 20 minutes into the raid. Glass shattered behind them. There was Stromschein and Idlin trying to break in, Team 2. As soon as that glass broke, both Ronenberg and Kaiser immediately had their guns out and turned on him. Then they realized who it was. They told Idlin, stay outside and block the window. We don't want any light streaming out, because most of the windows were blacked out. Stronheim comes in. So right now all the guard knows, the night shift worker, is now that there's 3 British commandos. They finished setting the charges, set it on a 120-second fuse, 2 minutes. Stronheim suggests do a 30-second fuse instead. No discussion. They set it on a 30-second fuse. Ronenberg had cut his hand badly, breaking out the rest of the glass to get Team 2 of the bombing team inside. He left the bloody glove and he left a British parachute badge as a calling card on the floor. They heard steps on the stairs. It's Olav Ingebrigtsen, a night watchman, coming down. Now they've got 2 captives. The fuses were lighted at 1:20 and then 30 seconds. To Johansen and Ingebrigtsen, Ronenberg ordered, upstairs, lie down, keep your mouths open or you'll blow out your eardrums. Immediately, they escaped out the one door that was now, they had opened to allow his team 2 to come in. They're outside now trying to get back to where the covering team is, and there was a faint thud behind them. Paulson, who was outside, turned to Knut Hauklid and said, "Is that it? That's all we came for?" It was so muffled because of the drone of the hydro plant behind them. Gunnerside headed back down the railroad tracks, back into the gorge faster than they had climbed. Reckless, going down, trying to get away. So far, nothing had happened. Moments later, sirens went off. Not a single shot had been fired. Now, if you go back to the movie that was made in '65, it was a major gun battle that never occurred. Right? Sirens are going off. The team is now away from Weimar, trying to get back down into the gorge, across the ice bridge, and back up on the north side. Alf Larsen, chief engineer of Weimar, was one of the first to survey the damage. He had heard the explosion at 1:15 a.m. The outside steel door had been blown off its hinges. The walls inside the high concentration room were scorched, and the entire room was in ruins. Heavy water swirled down the floor drains. Back at the road where their checkpoint was, where they left their skis and their white covers, redonned their white camouflage, and continued their climb, often jumping through plowed snow to avoid cars going towards Rjukan and buses of soldiers that were following, coming up into Weimar from Rjukan, skiing towards Kosovo, and then their half-mile vertical climb to the Vita. Long past exhaustion, the searchlights at Weimar had yet to come on. This is now 2 a.m., 45 minutes after the explosion. Nothing happening at Weimar. Temperatures now starting to fall fast. Near the top, Ronenberg called for a rest break. The sun was now beginning to come up. Gunnerside knew the Nazis would never venture into the Vita with a storm brewing. At this point, many of the team members broke up, going in different directions. Some went into Rjukan. Some headed towards Oslo. Some into the Vita. And 5 of the Gunnerside members, including Ronenberg, off towards Sweden. The route that they were following would have taken them from down here in Weimar, north and then east, and above Lillehammer. At that point where they made the turn, coming down to the east side of Lillehammer, and then to the Swedish border. Sweden was neutral. Ronenberg, years later in the 1990s, had called this the best cross-country skiing of my life. The German response, SS officer, 2nd Lieutenant Muggenthaler, failed to see the saboteurs hiding in the snow. The 9 of them, when they were climbing up, dove down behind a snowbank from plowing, and his car went right past them. They never were spotted. But at this point, they're in their camouflage whites. During the interrogation, all the Nazis were being told was 3 men in British uniforms came in and spoke flawless Norwegian. They were not amateurs. Clearly this was a military operation. German General Nicholas von Falkenhorst, head of the German military forces in Norway, said this is the most splendid coup he had ever seen. Berating the team at Wehrmacht, he said that if you have a chest of jewels, you don't walk around it. You plant yourself on the lid with a weapon. Sergeant Major Glassen and Captain Nestler of the Wehrmacht Guard bundled up against the cold. Falkenhorst said, you look like a lot of Father Christmases. You're bundled up like that. You can't see and you can't hear. The saboteurs with those kind of clothes on. Where are these lights? Turn the lights on. The lights didn't come on until long after Falkenhorst was back in Rjukan. The changes that they had made at the guard at Wehrmacht, they didn't know where the switch was to turn the lights on. This sounds like it could be out of Hogan's Heroes, doesn't it? With the mistakes that were made. Okay? He ordered classes of many of the guards to be removed to the Russian front. Okay? Citizens, prominent citizens of Rjukan who had been rounded up for execution. He said this is a military operation and revenge killings will not change those facts, and ordered all of them released. Gunnerside had set the heavy water facility back nearly 7 to 8 months. They destroyed roughly a 3 to 4 month supply of heavy water, and it would be another 3+ months before the Nazis were able to rebuild what the damage was that was done. SOE, on March 1, BBC monitoring picked up the Swedish radio broadcast because no message had been sent back to SOE yet. What they picked up was perpetrated against Norsk Hydro installations. Damages are said to have been extensive, but at one point where the attack was made, destruction was said to be complete. The attack was performed by 3 Norwegian-speaking soldiers in British uniforms now being searched for. That was the way England was able to get the information that Gunnerside had been successful. Let's fast forward a few months. 16 November 1943. As Frank had indicated, they can't bomb it, right? Right? The United States Army Air Force sent 176 B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberator bombers into Wehrmacht and Rjukan, Norway. Bombing runs were to start at 12 noon, started at 12:12. They elected the time to be, we need to find a way that we may be able to reduce civilian casualties. We'll make this bombing run during lunch when people are out of these buildings. They dropped over 700 bombs. Now, in whether a bombing run is successful and how it is measured, 37% hit within 1,000 feet of the target. 85% hit within 2,000 feet. The problem was the B-24s that had come in were supposed to have been on a bombing run near Oslo. That was completely fogged over. So they were redirected to Rjukan. And coming into Rjukan, they bombed the nitrate plant. They hit it. That was not the target. That was in downtown Rjukan. Okay. 2.5 tons, primarily from the B-17s, did hit the hydro plant. In that clip from Heavy Water War, one of the things that were brought out was the U.S. Army Air Force general said, I'm not going to just destroy it. We're going to get it to bomb it to the point you won't even know it was there. That's the extent of what they did. And one of the British officers said, if you're not thinking that you're going to be able to penetrate down through 7 floors of reinforced concrete, they damaged the top 2 floors. 4 bombs hit the plant out of 700. Where was the heavy water? Down there in the basement. At this far side of the plant and low. No damage whatsoever to the heavy water facility. 20 February 1944, because the attack that occurred on Weimar by Gunnerside, and now the bombing runs, Germany elected, we need to get the heavy water out of there and bring it to Germany. They were going to transport it from Weimar down to Lake Thames, put it on a ferry, take that ferry down to the other end of the lake, load it from there onto a rail line, take that to a shipping port, and then take it to Germany. Lake Tinso is the 24th deepest natural lake in the world. It is 460 meters deep, which is over greater than 1,500 feet. Knut Haukland of Gunnerside teamed up with Larson, was the one who were able to place the charges. Remember what Falkenhurst said, when you have a chest of jewels, what do you do with it? You sit on the lid with a weapon in your hand. That's exactly what the Germans did. They brought the rail cars down, and they made sure they guarded the rail cars. They neglected to guard the ferry. Haukland and Larson were able to get aboard the ferry and place charges in the bow of the ferry. There was a gentleman in Rjukan who collected clocks and was able to build a timer for the clocks as a fuse to be able to set the charges off. The next afternoon, when the ferry was out in Lake Ten, the bomb went off and the ferry went down in about 5 minutes. 16 Norwegians lost their lives on that. Let's fast forward. PBS Nova. How many people have ever watched it? Right? Right. In 2004, Nova did an expedition to Lake Ten. Right? It was done in an episode called Hitler's Sunken Secrets, because there had been some debate as to whether or not there was indeed heavy water being transported. They sent a robotic submersible into Lake Ten. They located the DF Hydro, but as a grave site, it would not be touched. They found scattered barrels on the lake bed. They brought up barrel 26, still sealed. When they opened it, it tested positive for heavy water. Okay. Remember earlier I had mentioned that at Farm Hall, Heisenberg said if he had 50% more heavy water and was able to have 50% more uranium, he could have built a fissionable reactor to make plutonium. That amount of water that he needed was at the bottom of Lake Ten. August 5th, 2018, last year is when my wife Debbie and I were here in Weymouth. Right? In this picture, right over here, you can see a little bit of what looks like a yellow stick. Okay, that's not a yellow stick, that's a steam shovel. Because in 2017, the question had come up, right? The plant no longer produces electricity. They stopped that in 1988. It is now the Norwegian Industrial Workers Museum. And because in 2017, they're saying, we're coming up close to the 75th anniversary of Gunnerside, when the hydrogen plant had been torn down in the 70s, and it was backfilled over, because that plant sat right in this area, right here. Could that basement still be there? What they found was, August and September, they began excavating the basement. That right there is that little yellow steam shovel that you saw in the previous picture. Late fall of 18, this is what they had uncovered. And that's the heavy water basement right there, in the high concentration room. When they were able to get inside, it was still completely intact. All it had done was been backfilled over. In 2020 and 2021, this is the artist's drawing of how this will be added to the Weymouth site. And they are doing tours today. They take 9 people in at a time. There's hard hat tour that you go in here with. And the reason they only take 9 is because there were 9 men involved in the Operation Gunnerside team. Right? So what is Rjukan and Weymouth like today? Right? Well, what's interesting is the mountains in Norway, and somebody had asked me one time, they said, well, what do you think of it? Well, Debbie and I have been all over the Colorado Rockies. When you see the Colorado Rockies, they're 3 or 4 times the size of these mountains. But in Norway, they are in your face. Those mountains are right there. Right? Rjukan is only 900 feet wide at the bottom of the Vestfjord Valley. And from September to March, sunshine does not get down in that valley. The mountains are too high. Right? They had talked about this idea for maybe 100 years, but only about 5 years ago did they complete it. Right? They installed mirrors on the top of one mountain so you could pick up the sunshine, bounce it off a mirror, and reflect it down into the town. The Krossebanen cable car that was put in by Norsk Hydro, so workers could at least get to the top of a mountain to be able to get sunshine during the winter. Okay? But now, in Weymouth, what do? They bungee jump off the suspension bridge. No thank you. Okay? Bungee jump, 275 feet off the bridge. You can barely see it in this picture, but there's somebody right there. And as you indicated, Frank, is it narrow?
Yep.
It's narrow.
It's very narrow.
Right? The bridge is only 80 feet long. And now you're jumping off into a gorge.
No.
Right? From the mirrors, when they pick up the sunshine and reflect it down, right, they get almost 3,000 square feet of sunshine down into the valley. Right? It is the Industrial Workers Museum today. Right? These were the turbines inside. There were 11 of them across the floor. They said the decibel level in there was between 130 and 150 dBs. That's like stand next to somebody and shout to be able to be heard. Right? Those were the electrolysis cells in the basement. Or this would have been above the basement because of windows and all. Right? This was our tour guide when we went through. Jokingly, as she said, because what deuterium oxide will do is it slows down the process of neutrons, protons, electrons, and all that are moving, right? But what it also does is if you have a little bit of deuterium oxide, plants will germinate slower. Okay? If you drink pure deuterium oxide, that occurs naturally in water. Out of a quart of water, you might get a drop of deuterium, okay? But it's highly expensive process to be able to separate it, right? But when she introduced herself to us at the beginning, she said that she was 106 years old, but she'd been drinking D2O. Norsk Hydro ceased operations in 1988. It's now the Norsk Industrial Workers Museum. www.nia.no/en will get you to their website in English. Right? In 2016, Joachim Ronenberg, leader of Gunnerside, had said, you have to fight for your freedom and for peace. You've got to fight for it every day to keep it. It's like a glass boat. It's easy to break. It's easy to lose. This monument sits outside of the Vemork plant, right there. What it says is heavy water sabotage at Vemork, 28 February 1943. This was the entire team. And then, Kari, you were the one that told me that with Norwegians, if they don't get a disease and die, they live forever.
Yes.
Yes.
If cancer doesn't take them, they live forever.
Yeah. Joachim, age 99. Dreimsand, 101. Jens Paulsen, 91. Kurt Haugland, 92. Okay? Knut Haugland was the radio operator on the Kon-Tiki in 1947 when they sailed across the Pacific. But does the world owe virtually everything to them? Pretty much. Two of them did die young. One was living in New York at the time. Yeah. See one thing real quick. This goes with the next slide. That's why I'm pausing for just a moment. What was appropriate to end with was something that occurred in 1942, in September 16th, actually, of 1942, when FDR was at the Washington Navy Yard with Crown Princess Martha. That was where he gave his speech, Look to Norway. Right? If there is anyone who still wonders why this war is being fought, let him look to Norway. If there is anyone who has any delusions that this war could have been averted, let him look to Norway. And if there is anyone who doubts the democratic will to win, again I say, let him look to Norway. I don't know that we're going to be able to actually get that. I don't believe we can.
Got it on your phone.
Hmm?
Have it on your phone, remember?
Yeah, I don't know where the phone is right now. In the dark, I can't find it. And if I touch that, that's going to switch the slide. Yeah. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, what made you get so interested in this?
I've always been a fan of World War II history.
Okay.
When we were there at Vemork, and taking the tour. That kind of fueled the fire a little bit. Yeah. And then it was 2 months after we were back, maybe 3 months after we were back, is when we had learned that Joachim Ronenberg had passed away. Okay.
Thank you very, very much. I'm another one who has always had interest in the World War, both in Europe and in Asia. And I was looking forward to this, wondering how you would do it. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Coffee and dessert.